Thank everyone for taking part in this. We greatly appreciate it, and we appreciate you as to who you are and the knowledge and the stories that you're going to be sharing with us during this webinar. I'm going to introduce Carlos to everyone. He's going to be pretty much hosting, and I'll be jumping in back and forth for mediator type stuff, and then we'll start with introductions from everyone else. So this is Carlos M. Baca. He's another member of the I Collective and one of the founding members of the I Collective, and he is one of the folks who is involved with putting together the virtual cookbook that the I Collective is working on, a gathering basket. And Carlos, I'll pass it over to you to add some more details.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Carlos Baca. I'm Dene and Nooch. I'm from the Southern Ute Reservation here in Southwest Colorado. My part in this project that we're working on, a gathering basket, is the written content. And so doing all the interviews with folks on the subjects that we're covering, really doing like the deep dive, super academic on a lot of fronts. Not that I'm an academic by any means, but and just kind of really, I don't know how much you guys know about the project in and of itself, but we're utilizing recipes to tell Indigenous histories when it comes to warfare against Indigenous food systems in general. So that can be like environmental racism, straight up racism. It can be treaty rights like this scenario, birthrights, any numerous different things. So for our viewers, I want to, before we go around and do introductions, I just want to kind of give a little bit of history about the history behind what the Walleye Wars were. And this is going to just be super, I just kind of like bullet pointed this. So I'm just going to like touch back as far as like 1868. When Wisconsin decided to apply laws to tribes that created hunting seasons and licensings, which was a direct violation of treaty rights. Follow that with 1908, the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled that they had jurisdiction over Indigenous hunting and fishing. The feds never did anything during that entire period, which created, obviously a snowball effect, and began the confiscation of fishing nets and spears, rifles, taking the game away from folks. And that was leading up to the 1974 Bolt decision in Washington State, which upheld the Indigenous fishing rights. In that kind of just set the precedent for a lot of things that were going to come afterwards when it came to fishing and hunting and gathering rights. So in 1974, the Tribble brothers filed a suit against the state of Wisconsin just weeks after the Washington ruling, to kind of take that bring it to a head. And this, I guess you would say, like, it officially started what is called the Walleye Wars. So anybody that has a subscription to the cookbook can get a lot more information on that, get a little bit more details about the outcome of that. And what we're going to discuss this evening is what that really looks like, you know, and how that affected the folks that are joining us on this panel, how it affected their families, how it affected the tribes. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and go around the virtual room real quick. I guess Michael, we'll start with you if you want to give a brief introduction to yourself and your work.
I'm Michael Christensen, and my name is Agamagizik, and I'm from Lac du Flambeau, Wisconsin, and I'm a chef at the Potawatomi Casino in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin right now. I don't know what else to say about myself right now.
That's good. Jerry?
All right.
Buju, get the Gabaju, Ninja Cause, Ajijak, and do them, we quaid on Kinto Jabano, Jabuena Schnabe, Nini, and Dao. My name is Jerry Jandro. I am a member of the Keweenaw Bay Indian community here in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, part of the Lake Superior Ojibwe. Actually coming to you from the reservation, so hopefully our internet holds out. My partner and I own and operate Dynamite Hill Farms, which is the logo that you see in the background there. My family has been been fishermen for a long time and food producers for a very long time. And, you know, Katie and I are, and same with her background too. I'll let her do her introduction for herself. But, you know, we've been a part of, you know, treaty rights and food production and stuff for a very long time. So, and I'll get into it later, I think, as we progress, but I've got another story too about my family that goes back before some of those other court cases that you had mentioned that really laid the tracks for those other court cases to come to fruition. Well, I guess our farm, we're trying to produce more culturally relevant foods. We go ricing. We tap our sugar maple trees in the backyard, and we do some bartering and stuff like that with some other folks that are producers, and really trying to get back to our responsibilities as Anishinaabe people on this land. And I think that's good enough for an introduction. If you don't mind, I'll turn it over to Katie, and hopefully this thing picks up. She's gonna have a floating head because she has a black sweater on right now, so it might be a little weird. Brace yourself.
Bonjour Gina Gakina, Mangi Dote, Miskobi Kanga Dunjuba, Makuntiban Baba Ben Shnabi when Kajuban, Ninsa Zivanikwe, Dejnakas, Mewa Anaguizes, Sibewa Shell. Yeah, so I'm my English name's Katie. They call me Zivanikwe. And I am originally from the Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior, Ojibwe. My family was really deeply involved in a lot of the work that we're talking about today, the Walleye Wars. And I grew up a lot with these stories and these conversations. And like Jerry had said, we have taken the stories that we have been given and the opportunities and the teachings that we got as young people, and have been using that and walking forward with our life and what we're doing, trying to find again for ourselves and you know, going upon the work that all those wonderful folks have done before us. And so tonight, hopefully we'll have a chance to share some of the things that we learned about and heard, and might help further some more knowledge and help people understand what we're doing here. So Miigwe Chapche for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you. Actually have some of you guys' maple sugar sitting over here in my pantry, so yeah. Abby, thanks for joining us. We are just going around and doing some introductions. Just a quick who you are, what you do. So if you want to hop on real quick, then when she's done, Greg, you can hop in there.
Oh, sorry I'm late, first of all. Yeah, my name is Abby Thompson from Lac du Flambeau. I'm also Greg's older sister. During the Walleye Wars in the 80s, I was like my late teenage years, but all of what happened definitely shaped me into the person I am today. And I just turned 53, so I do remember everything that happened. And I was there during it all. I worked for the tribal court at the time, and which meant that I worked with the Voight lawyers and Tom Malson and pretty much all the heavy hitters for Lac du Flambeau. So, yep, I remember it all. I just wanted to hear what everyone else was saying and, kind of share what I went through. So, thanks for welcoming me.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
Yep. So, what did I miss?
We're just doing introductions at the moment,
okay.
so you're right on time.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've got my little grandson, so.
No problem. No problem.
Yeah,
We're used to the babies kicking around here. All right, so let's pass it up to.
I don't know if any of y'all can hear me. Can you hear me?
I
Because
can.
my sound completely went out and I can't hear anybody.
We can hear you.
And so I'm going to be on mute trying to figure that out real quick.
All right. All right, then let's pass it up to Mr. Greg Johnson. I believe you're the last to introduce yourself. And then if you don't mind, after you, I'll give myself a quick introduction because I failed to do so. So, Greg, take it away.
Bonjour. Biscakone, Indigenous Bijuro name, Aswagan, Ishkanaganing, and Unjaba. My English name is Greg Johnson. I come from the Lac du Flambeau Ojibwe Reservation. I'm an avid hunter, gatherer, spear fisherman. I also have gardens and I grow tobacco, and I do a lot of different things in our community here. And I work with the tribe. I'm one of the language resource people and one of the cultural teachers around here. And I'm really happy to be here today. Talk a little bit about some of my experiences. Treaty rights. I love everything treaty related. I'm one of the big time harvesters. I try to use all my rights here within our ceded territory. So thanks for inviting me and having me along.
Appreciate it. Real quick about myself. My name is Quentin. I'm a member of the Frog Lake Cree First Nations in Alberta, Canada, member of the I Collective, and one of the folks who's working alongside with Carlos and the others to put together a Gathering Basket interactive cookbook. I'm the video coordinator, so any teasers or some video editing that you see, that's me trying to be all pro, learning as I go. And again, big hats off to everyone here that's partaking and joining. We appreciate it. And I'm now going to hand it over to Carlos. Carlos, can you hear me?
I can't hear anything.
Okay.
I have no idea what the heck is going on here.
Finished. Intro. This is going to be fun. I don't know about y'all, but I'm excited now. All right, so I'm going to communicate with Carlos via text messaging and electronic smoke signals.
Okay, can everybody out there hear me though? You guys are good? All right. Well, I guess that this is going to be super awkward because I'm not going to hear any answers that are coming out. But I will continue to mess with this and see if I can figure it out in the meantime. I guess within the issue itself for a gathering basket, there's a lot of history. There's a lot of views from a lot of the, from all 11 tribes that work within that were involved in this conversation. So a lot of that history has been laid down. There's a lot of that already there. So I guess my question would be, to start us off is, how did the Walleye Wars affect you? How did they affect your families and your tribe as a whole? And so if anybody wants to pick that up, we can go right into that. We can go around. You guys can pass the mics around. You good to go.
All right. Tell you what, since you can't hear me, I'll give you 2 thumbs up that we all hear you and agree. And I'm going to go ahead, and because Abby, I see that you're not muted, let's jump in with you.
What's that? I'm not.
Yes. Let's start with you. So the question that Carlos had
How did it affect my family?
Pardon me?
How did it affect my family and tribe?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. It affected every aspect of living up here. I mean, you couldn't leave your house without somebody saying something to you, calling you names. Yeah. My brother Greg was spit on. He was a young boy, but he can tell you about that. But I was, like I said, in my late teens, and it's like everywhere. You go to the store and see your friends and neighbors, and they would share stories about what they just saw or went through at our nearest town in Minocqua, which is a primarily non-native town. Like the scene of a lot of the racism that we saw. I mean, it affected everything. But at the same time, there's one good thing that did happen. It kind of pulled us together as community. It made all of the tribal members closer with each other. And I can come up with a lot more of the stories, but I'd like to hear what Greg says too. So.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for asking me to mic, Ab. So when this whole spearfishing controversy happened, I was pretty young, but I remember I was telling Abby this morning how I kind of got roped into everything. I was probably about 12 years old, and we were at a local grocery store, and my mom and dad had already went in, and I was waiting outside with my grandmother, and we were walking in, and this truck rolls up, and they spit on me and her, these people, and they called us timber niggers. And so I didn't know what that was about. I was scared. I felt pretty offended by that. But then later on, I went home and I had no idea, and my grandma just said, just ignore them. We went and we did our shopping, and we came home later, and I remember asking my mom about, what was that about? And she said, it's because we spearfish. They don't like us, and that's where that comes from. That's where that stems from. And then I remember shopping with my parents and going to certain stores, and there was a little fluorescent orange sign in the window. It says, "We support PAR," which basically meant it was I guess they're listed as a hate group now, but they call themselves Protect America's Rights and Resources. And it was an orange sticker, and those were the stores that we didn't go into when we were growing up. We didn't. There was a sign in the window. It was pretty wild to think about it. It was pretty segregated in those days, and that was the 90s. That was the 89, 90, around that area, around that time, late 80s all the way into the 90s. And so we grew up with that as young people, and that was our reality. We had to go through. And then later on in high school, there was the people who ran these anti-Indian associations. Their children went to school with us, and so we faced a lot of racism like that in the school system. And the school really didn't do anything about it, and which is funny. You look back on some of the videos, and the very people that were giving us the education in high school, some of those people were at those boat landings throwing rocks at us, and
Oh yeah.
in saying those things, you know, and they were big supporters of that. So growing up with that was you know, that was a harsh reality the Ojibwe people in northern Wisconsin had to live through. And so later on, you know, that just added fuel to the fire. We were like, well, we're going to spear then, you know. And so I remember the first time I went out with my brother. He took me on the lake on the res, and I got my first muskie, and I've been hooked. I was hooked ever since, you know. I went out and got this huge muskie that, like, the first 30 minutes I was out in the boat, I got a big fish. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. I'm going to do this till I'm dead, you know. And so I continued to do that. And then eventually I became one of the bigger advocates for the culture and treaty rights around here. I've been through a number of things, and it really shaped who I am today. Going through all that, you know, and standing up for my people and standing up for my family and giving my family the food that our ancestors had, you know. And it was interesting what was mentioned earlier about the when the treaty rights were taken away from the Ojibways, and then later on when they were reaffirmed, our grandparents and our great grandparents, they didn't get a chance to live with those rights like we do today. So we are very grateful. But it's our older ancestors way back in the beginning, right prior to the treaties, and all the way back to the beginning. They benefited from that, and it really helped them. And you know, that was a big part of our culture, and that's a big part of who we are. And so today we're all looking back, and we're trying to obtain that and make that a part of our identity again. And so, you know, growing up with that, it's our responsibility as providers and hunters and fishermen and spear fishermen and women. We have to continue that because we understand that our people bled for those rights and they died for that, and they left that for us. So those are our inherent rights. They're given to us from our great grandfathers who signed those treaties, and they thought so highly of us that the way they worded those treaties and the way we benefit from their way of life today. And so the least we can do is you know, utilize those treaty rights and take them forward into the future. And so sharing that responsibility is a very, very important part of being Anishinaabe and being Ojibwe today. And I'm really grateful that I went through what I went through. I went through a lot of things in my life. And I guess later on I can talk about the different things that I've gone through personally with harassment and racism. And there's a lot of, there's piles and piles of things, you know, but it'll never outweigh the good that came from harvesting and feeding our community and our families. So I guess that's part of the territory, you know, that's part of having those rights and stuff. You know, we gotta make sacrifices, you know, and so that's where I guess some of that comes in. That's what was explained to me anyway. So that's kind of how treaty rights shaped me into who I am today. And one more thing, I had a really, really good cushy job one time, and my two oldest kids were really young, you know. And then I lost my job. We had a really bad financial season in our tribe one year, and so you know, I didn't want to give my kids government food because I had that when I was young and I didn't like it, you know. So I was very fortunate to have the opportunity growing up having treaty rights. And so what I did was, when I didn't have a job anymore, I utilized hunting, fishing, and gathering. I hit it hard for like 3 years straight when I didn't have a job. And that got us through, and that made everything better. And so from that point on, in my I think it was my late 20s, I'm in my 40s now, but from my late 20s all the way up till today, there isn't a day that doesn't go by where I don't utilize treaty rights or culture or something and implement it somehow in our family and our lives here. So that's kind of how it's shaped me and where I come from.
Well, thank you. I can actually hear you guys again, so that's a good thing. You know, just keep going around and having that conversation.
Yeah, let's Jerry.
Jerry swapped me the baby over here so I could jump in on this one. So I think I'm the baby on the phone call here. I'm the youngest of everyone. And so my memories are a little different than everyone's because these are my only memories. So in 1989, I was 4 years old and I don't remember anything but this way, what they're talking about. So I was born right when all of this was going on and all beginning. And my dad was Mont Brezet. So when all this was happening, we were traveling in Abby, I saw you smile a little bit, huh? When this was going on, my dad was taking Abby and Greg and doing all this work around. Yeah, it looked about like that, huh? Doing all of this work. And so there were just like Greg and Abby were kind of pointing out, like when you live up in northern Wisconsin, those spaces, there were places you just didn't go. And as when those were your first memories, you remembered like towns you drive through or around and you don't go through those spaces. I remember the signs and learning, you know, like the Mr. Yuck sign, right? Like with the little green symbol, but like there's the orange par signs where you make sure, you know, you don't go those places. You got to make sure, you know, you're safe. And so as a kid, it wasn't anything that was different. It was just the way it was. But what was very interesting about that space was, and a lot of people call these the Walleye Wars, but what some people forget about is the Walleye Warriors, right? And so because there were all those folks out there working and doing all of this and fighting hard, tooth and nail, those of us who are here and have these memories are the ones who are benefiting from all those warriors, from those folks who are out there fighting and working. And so as a child, all of my memories are centered around going to these places and having these conversations. I mean, I remember the story of my dad going to the PAR rallies and talking with people and bringing folks up into the communities and trying to help others understand, you know, what actually was happening in these places, and the longevity of what happened in those spaces. They went on for so much longer than people understand. So I as a teenager, I was moved down to Madison after my father passed away. We moved down south further, and I remember being 16, 17 years old and going down to one of my friends. She had like a downstairs bathroom, and I was going bathroom, and I looked up and I saw her dad's jean jacket, and on there was Spirit Indian Save a Walleye button that was sitting right there. And I looked at her and I said, "Did you tell your dad I'm Ojibwe?" And she's like, "What? No." It's like, "Don't you dare tell him. Don't you dare tell him I'm Anishinaabe. Don't tell him I'm Ojibwe. Tell him I'm Puerto Rican or whatever. I don't care. Just don't tell him I'm Ojibwe." And and he never knew my last name. And I told her, I said, "Please don't ever tell him my last name because we're not going to be allowed to hang out no more. Like I can't come over here if that's the case." And so that was years and years later, right? Like that's 2000, 2001. Like, and a lot of people really misconstrue or they don't understand the longevity that a lot of folks want to do, especially with that racism space. Like, "Oh, why don't you all just get over this?" Right? Like that's the typical story a lot of folks are hearing these days. Or, "Why don't we want critical race theory and all this other garbage in there?" You know, like, "Why don't we want to hear this?" Like that kind of understanding, that kind of that ignorance in that space is really detrimental, and that's the part that is hard to explain, that it's still ongoing, right? You have to tell them your own story, and then the fact that it was your dad's story and your grandma's story and everybody's story that was there before you, and that it also is like, as we're raising our kids up too, we still have to warn them, right? Like we still have to tell them, we still have to make sure they know and understand those people aren't gone. Those signs, maybe the signs are taken down, but they're still out there, right? They just have a different sign on them. And so that the longevity of the repercussions of how powerful that time period was just go on and on and on and on. And so I just want to kind of add that to it, to what everyone's sharing with it, is that some people, this is all they've ever known. And so it wasn't a switch in a time period. A lot of us really have only ever known that. And even though that what people considered being hidden, right? Like, or it's going away or it's gotten better. I mean, and Greg was saying, you know, he'll share a little bit later too about his own personal stories that are real recent, like within the last couple of years, right? And this story is going on and on and on. And so the beautiful thing about it is that one of the things that I think Jerry and I tend to try and explain and talk with people a lot about is, you know, we're this generation, like we're the legal generation, right? Like we're legally allowed. And it was just before then, right? Before the Voight decision and before these other decisions that Chiala were sharing about with the history, before those decisions came through, the Jantra decision, Jerry's reminding me, before these decisions were going through, people were being jailed directly and they were being hauled off and they were getting taken away. And after that point in time, even though we were still not necessarily safe, it was legally allowed. People had brought it to the courts. And so it's not only I think Greg had kind of mentioned it just a little bit ago, you know, it's our responsibility to the ones who have all those warriors who walked ahead of us and shown us this way and put themselves in danger and harm's way. And we're young people or older people. And then the ones who made those choices for us, you know, they made those decisions for us over 150 years ago. They put their foot down and said, you know, we're going to put this in this document so that our greats of all of them can be a part of this and they can have these rights. And so it's our responsibility to maintain that fight and to take that the all the fights and all the things, pull that onto our own shoulders, right? And walk with that burden. And fortunately, there's so much more of us now. There's so much of us these days who are seeing it, right? And there's more people around who are not just the Nishnabeg, not just Ojibwe, who are trying to help us carry some of those weights. But it's opportunities like this where we get to speak more freely, right? Ninga o Nishnabeg, ninga Ojibwe mo, ama like I can go and lecture my kids in the middle of a grocery store and a little old white lady will walk up and be like, oh, that's just cute. I don't know what you're saying, but it's so pretty, right? But not only, it was just 30 years ago that if they did that in a grocery store, they could get beat, they could get jailed, they could get dragged away, they could get there are repercussions for it. And so it's our responsibility and our rights to really like take on that space and continue to use our language and our treaty rights and all the work that we've all been trying so hard to do. So that's all for now.
Thank you, Katie. Appreciate that. Katie, did Jerry want to jump in or is he a little occupied at the moment? We'll say he's occupied. Oh, jump in.
Yeah, I don't think I have a whole lot more to add to that. I spent a lot of my time off the reservation because my father was in the military the entire time I was growing up. So we just come back here for the powwows and for family stuff. But I mean, I can tell you now that you know the issue is not done. You know, we're still dealing with I guess the ramifications of the Walleye War even today. You know, we're just a few months away from going out there and spearing again. And even though we know we have these rights and we exercise these rights, we know that we're going to be putting ourselves in the line of violence potentially to feed our family. I mean, that's still a reality today. And you know, when we're out on that water, there's still a lot of non-tribal people that have the lakeshore homes that can't stand the fact that there are tribal people out there on the water spearing fish. There's people that get upset that we're out there fishing and we're spearing because they want trophy. They want fish that they can put up on their wall. Well, we want fish we can put on our plate. And that upsets them. And I've had people like just recently, I mean, I was out spearing, it wasn't walleye, but it was a salmon season here. And, you know, I had a guy confront me on the shore and he was pissed off that I was out there spearing fish. I had 4 salmon with me, you know, and that was it. And I was calling it a day and he came up and he was a little drunk, but I mean, he was giving me all kinds of crap because he said he'd been out there all day and he didn't catch any fish. And it's just not right that we can go out there and spear those fish. And, you know, I told him, you know, we're not the ones that make the policy for non-tribal people. If you have an issue with you not being able to spear, you have to take that up with your state regulators. That's not a tribal rule or law that says that you can't do this. This is a state regulation that regulates your rights. So if you have an issue with tribal members being able to do this thing, you're taking it up with the wrong people. You need to take it up with your own natural resources departments and advocate to them that you want to spear. You don't get mad at us because we can do it. You know, we're not the ones telling you that you can't. So these things are alive and well, and I know Greg's got a really rough story, and I don't know when we're gonna like circle around back to that, but I mean, these things are alive and well. I mean, these things that our fathers and our aunties and stuff were doing back in the day. I mean, we're still seeing those, and we're still facing that on a much more of a micro level, but it still exists. And I know that when I'm out there with my spear and stuff, like there's still a level of uncertainty every time I go out, even though I know it's legal. I still feel like I have to, you know, be very cautious. And you know, sometimes I'm scared to even take my kids out there to do that, because you never know what you're going to come across. So yeah, the walleye wars, you know, well, it really came to a head with the walleye wars, but that sentiment has been there for a long time, and it's still here today. But I think that, you know, the walleye wars just really brought everything to a head, and so it's still there. It's not as bad, but it's still there. And I think I'll leave it at that, because my little baby's over there giggling. I want to get into that action. So miigwech.
All right, Michael.
Hi, everyone. I'm Buju. So I have a little bit more to add to this a little bit. My thoughts and my memories about the walleye wars and spirit. I don't even call it walleye wars. It was just my right to spear. And when I'll go back to when I was about 7, probably 10 or 11 years old. The first time I speared, I was probably 10 or 11. And I went with my uncle and my cousin. And my uncle is William Wildcat. And at the time, he was our tribal chairman. And my cousin is Joe Wildcat. And they had their houses right on the lake. They're like, oh, we're going to go out and spear. And I was like, I'm going to teach you how to spear. So I was like, okay. And we're getting ready for this, getting ready. And we had these like construction hats on. And we had car headlights on the top that we used to light up the water to see the fish and look for the eyes of the fish. And they were telling me to kind of aim for the back of the neck, right behind the eyes. You got to hit, that's where you want to hit the fish at. So you don't hurt the fish that much, keep the meat that you're trying to get. And it was a wonderful experience doing that. And so I was like, Greg, I was hooked on spearing. And the first time I did it, I was like, this is so fun. So I grew up in Chicago, and I would go back home in the summer or in the spring to be with my cousin Joe and my uncle and stuff. They were the ones that taught me about being Ojibwe and living up there in Flambeau at the time. And so to fast forward a little bit more to the spearing rights, when it started and people were talking about 89, it really, for me, I would say it started like more like 87. And before it really got popular, or not even popular, but more about when it started to come out on the news. It was on CNN in the news about the spearing rights in Lac du Flambeau. And I remember calling and talking to my dad. My dad had a restaurant. And I was like, hey, I live in Minneapolis, Dad. I said, what's going on up there with the spearing rights? I said, I want to come home and spear. He's like, oh, no, don't come now. He goes, it's bad. And I was kind of hurt. You know, he told me don't come home. And I was just kind of hurt. And I was like, why? He's like, it's just bad. I was like, what do you mean it's bad, Dad? And he's like, oh, we have spearing and people are getting mad at us about it. We're going to have to spear. But I think, I don't know about the year, but I'd say when I started really excelling into the war was when Lac du Flambeau exercised their right to spear off the reservation. And that's really what accelerated the wars. And to talk a little bit more about the Lac du Flambeau, it is French for Lake of the Torch. And we got our name from the French settlers or the French fur traders, European fur traders that came through, and they seen the Lac du Flambeau people spearing at night, and they seen the holding a torch, and that's how we got our name, Lake of the Torch. to really talk about Lac du Flambeau and where our name came from. And so with that being said, going forward more with the spring ride, I was like, no, Dad, I'm gonna come home. I wanna be part of this. I wanna support. And I was like, even if I can't go spear, he goes, I just want to support. And he's like, okay. So I came home that first year, the year that happened. And when we exercised our rights to go off the reservation to spear, I remember in the afternoons, people were meeting and talking about what lake they're going to go to. And we had to go like in a convoy. I guess you could say like a convoy, but we went like as a pack because we were getting, yelled at and just, I don't want to say racist, but, just being people that hated us because of our right that we were trying to exercise. And I didn't know, I didn't look at it as racism. I just looked at it as it was my right. And I wanted to support my people. So that's why I went back to help for that. And so I went 2 years in a row. So 88, 89. And I went back for those years. I lived in Minneapolis and I would go back home for that. And one of the times I went there, before I went, I remember my dad and my cousins talking about our as the other lady said, our warriors were out there spearing and they were getting hit with ball bearings from slingshots. And when a couple of people got hit, it was almost like they talked about it being like hit by a 22, like a bullet. They were getting shot with ball bearings. So that was the things. That's what made me want to go home. When I heard those stories, I wanted to support, just to be there to help or just show that, hey, I'm from Lac du Flambeau too, and I want to be part of this. Not knowing that it was a war, I just knew I was part of support for that. For that being said, but I'm going to talk about my uncle. He worked in the fish hatchery we have in Lac du Flambeau, and he said, "Oh, we were spearing, but the lakes that we spear, we go back and we restock these lakes with the eggs from the fish hatchery." So I was like, okay, how come everybody's mad at us for restocking the lakes that we went and speared? Why? And it was just ignorance and just hate. Someone said they want trophy fish or there's no more walleye. That was the thing. They're like, oh, you're taking all the walleye. There's no walleye for us because we can't catch them and you guys can spear them. So I think that's part of what the Walleyes was really about. And we'll talk a little bit more about it. I went back the last year when I kind of went to a head with everything. There was, Abby might know too. I remember I heard about it that, sorry, guys. Technical difficulties here. My phone fell over. So one of the last big events that I remember about this was it was kind of like PAR was there. I guess you guys call them PARs. And we were at a lake and there was a hill and everybody was supposed to go there to spear. And through the evening, as they were spearing through the night, it was, kind of towards the end of the spearing and the guys were coming off the lakes and, pulling up their boats and getting ready. And then people were just starting arguing and fighting and not really fighting, but just arguing back and forth. And, and it was almost like, as my dad said to me the next day or then later after we left, he's like, oh, it became like king of the hill. And it was like, who could stand on top of the hill? And we were on the bottom and PAR was kind of more up on top looking down on us. And we started like just pushing our way up the hill. And it wasn't as a physical fight, but it was more just physical, everybody just standing together and pushing their way up the hill. And they started backing down the hill. And then it started to get a little bit more, it's kind of violent. But then all of a sudden, I never heard of the group. I heard of the group before. I shouldn't say I never heard of the group. But out of the woods came another group of Native Americans to help us was AIM. AIM came and helped us push on top of the hill. And when we got to, we had the hill, I guess you could say king of the hill, we took that as a victory. And, I said, this is ours. This is what we do. Leave us alone. And AIM was there and it kind of dispersed because it was more the non-native people were outnumbered. When we would go out, we would be outnumbered like 2-1, 3-1. This time they were outnumbered, the non-natives, by like 3-1 and 4-1 because of the AIM people. And I remember this. I have a cold. I'm not crying, but I remember this that I seen it on CNN later in the news that CNN was there too that night. AIM was there for the Walleye Wars, and it was just not part of just being there to show my support. My brother being there, we talked about this, and he remembered that day and that night. And he's like, "Make sure you talk about this. Make sure you talk about this." I was like, "Okay," and so that was kind of the end. Like the '89, it kind of stopped. The spearing wars somewhat slowed down or calmed down after that year. But a couple years later, I came back to. I started working in a casino in Minnesota, and on the border is Hinckley. I worked for a casino in Hinckley, Minnesota, and now I'm a chef, and I'm telling a story because there was some young guys working I'm working in the restaurant in the buffet, and there was some of the bussers came in, some young teenager guys. They were coming in there mumbling, and they were just just getting amped up about something. I was, "Hey guys, what's wrong? What's wrong?" It's like, "Oh, Mike." And there's this guy out there, he has a t-shirt on, and he goes, "We want to go back and kick his ass." I said, "Well, wait a minute, guys, we're working. You can't go beat up somebody in the casino. Like, this is our jobs." I was like, "What has he got on? What's going on?" So like, "Come on, we'll show you. We'll show you." So I walked out there with these three young guys, young teenagers, and the guy had a t-shirt on that said, "Save a Walleye Spearing Indian." And it was like, oh my gosh. I was like, "Guys, stop." I was like, and I tried talking to the guy, and he seen us coming, so he walked away. And then he walked out of the buffet, and then he started walking around the casino. So I alerted security and told him what was going on. So then I followed this guy probably a good 5 minutes trying to weave his way in and out the slot machines and around the casino and stuff. And finally security, some big security guys stopped him and kind of cornered him. And the security guy was very nice to him. He's like, "Hey," he goes, "this is a sovereign nation." He goes, "This is, you can't wear that t-shirt." He's like, "Oh, this is America." He's like, "Well, you're not in America right now. You're on a tribal reservation. And we're asking you to take that t-shirt off if you want to stay here and gamble." And he got kind of upset. And he's like, "Well, I got this happy chef following me around trying to bust me out about this." And I said, "Hey, if I take off this hat, I won't be smiling anymore." So then he just like, okay. And he walked away and left. But it was just weird that, not weird, but to calm down some teenage boys that were ready to just whoop this guy's ass in the buffet. I said, "Guys, you got to stop that," because I didn't know what they were fussing about. And I just kind of heard them mumbling in the corner and that they were going to go jump this guy. So, "What are you guys talking about?" So that was just kind of the reality of being Native, that the anger and the hate that we have to live with, just being who we are. Nothing different about us. We're all humans, but just people for whatever reason, not for whatever reason, but because we're not like them, they don't like us. But it just was kind of hurting to hear these boys are like, "Oh, let's jump this guy. Let's jump this guy." So, "What are you guys talking about?" And I just remember that story. It's like to stop it. And then the security came, and it was some pretty big security guys that were Native too, and they were very nice, and they were being very professional. I shouldn't say nice, but they're being very professional to like tell this guy, "Hey, you got to take that shirt off. And, you're on a tribal casino." And this was in '93, because I remember the casino opened '91, and I went to another casino, but we just opened like maybe 2 months that this other casino was open. And it was just, I never seen that shirt. I heard about that phrase, but I've never seen it. And then someone to wear a shirt, I was just like, so just frustrated. I was like, "Nah, why are you wearing that shirt?" It's like, it was just bad. It just felt bad. So it's kind of where I'm at with it. So I'll sign off for a second.
Yeah, I mean, that's, no, you can go ahead.
Sorry. Greg asked me to jump in and introduce myself. I was wrangling children at the start of this. So, Buju and Nangokwe Indishnakas, Wawashkatak and Dochbia was swaganing Edayan, Borewadmi Mina Odawa and Dao. I am, what I just said, I said, "Hello, my Anishinaabe name is Anangokwe, which means star woman. My English name is Alexandria Sulinus. I'm Greg's partner, which our cool spearing background is cutting him out of the picture. But I'm Greg's partner, and this is our cute son of Siganak that decided to join the conversation too. So sorry for hopping on a little bit late, guys. I don't have much to add to memories of the Walleye Wars. I was not here. I was not involved with that at that time, but I think later on in the conversation, when Craig shares more of his story, I will have more to add then, just from a today perspective. Something that Greg and I do together is we'll go around and we will do talks and we'll teach on just food sovereignty and treaty rights and kind of how that all looks today and from a family aspect. So I'm excited to be here with you guys as well.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I mean, and this actually goes perfect into the next part of the conversation. You know, when I was looking into this, writing this piece and doing this, you know, it was really blatant and forward facing that even though the Walleye Wars is theoretically something from the past, that it really hasn't gone anywhere, right? The battle's just shifted in some places. And, you know, I was shared with, I think, Ernie Stevens III shared with me a Facebook post from the Wisconsin outdoorsman a few months ago, and of course they've deleted it since then. But some of the comments on there in reference to the spearing, right? Like, is there a bag limit on Indians? You know, I'm all for spearing Native Americans. Is it legal to spear Indians? You know, like these things haven't really gone anywhere, right? There's just maybe not as physically confrontational. I guess I would bet Greg would probably differ with that. I guess we'll hear about that in a second. But you know, it's like the fact that these things are still going. I mean, I know in British Columbia, which one is it? It's in Treaty 8 territory in British Columbia. You know, they're fighting with it right now. It's the exact same thing that happened during the Walleye Wars is what's going on there. You know, the RMCP, the RCMP is going through and taking their nets, taking their rifles, taking all these things. And this is 2021. So it's not like the conversation has really changed too much, you know? So, with that being said, I think where are we? You know, what is happening right now? Like, where did the front lines move to, and what does that look like being on there? So if you wanted to hop on and tell that story, it'd be perfect.
Yeah, okay. So I'll tell you a little bit about what happened last year. There was a group of us. It was our spearing team, and what we do is we create these. We get these permits that our tribe sets. They have what's called a quota on each lake, and what they do is the previous year they'll go and they'll shock that lake, and what they're doing is they're getting an average fish count. There's no way you can get an actual fish count on a lake, you know, because of depth. And what they do is they basically go around the whole lake and shock like every 60 feet, and whatever comes up they count it and they throw it back in, count it, throw it back in, and go all around. So that's how populations are determined. And so it's up to the task force to set the bag limits on those lakes. And so when those bag limits come up, we're only allowed a certain percentage of the total allowable catch. So maybe the total allowable catch for the whole season would be maybe the safe harvest limit would be 200 walleyes. And so we only take a fraction of that. So, you know, sometimes it's just 50 fish or 40 fish or maybe 10 on some lakes, you know. And so that's all determined. So one night, one of these lakes came up, and I had issues on this lake before. The first time I went on this lake, we didn't know which way to go because it was a lake I wasn't really familiar with, and we usually hit the shorelines because when the water reaches a certain temperature, it triggers a spawn, and the fish come in shallow. And so I said, well, let's just take a right. So we took a right, and right actually heads back into the town of Saint Germain. And there's all these big $1 million mansions on the shoreline here. And so, like Jerry had said that earlier, it's always in the back of your mind something's going to happen, so you got to be ready for that, and that's just part of the spearing experience, or in any type of gathering. And so we went right. We ran around this point, and there was a guy fishing there. And so I told my motorman, you use your steering pole to steer. So I pointed it left to let my motorman behind me know that we got to avoid this guy's fishing line because he's overfishing. And we went around this guy's line, and I tried to stay at least like 40 feet out from him. And he just started swearing at me and cussing at me and threatening me. And he said, I'm going to go up to the house, I'm going to get my gun, and that's an easy target. I'm going to shoot you in the head or something like that. Anyway, we're like, well, we better, I said, just keep going. I told the motorman to go around the corner, and I had this feeling all night, I had the scope on the side of my head all night long, when I was out there. But I just kept doing it. I just kept spearing anyway. And I was thinking about my children, and I was thinking about my family. And, that's an uneasy, unnerving thing to experience is to have something like that happen, And I remember when I was younger, I didn't care. I didn't care if that happened, but I have a family, I have 4 kids now. And so that really affected me, mentally anyway. And so fast forward a year later, same lake, and we get out there and they're like, well, which way do you want to go? I said, don't go right. Let's go left from the landing. So we get in the boat. The first bay we get into, there was these people drinking on their deck. And naturally we avoid them. So I pointed my steering pole to the right so we can go around their docks. And I remember the lake was like glass that night, and we were starting to pick up fish right away in that bay. And I heard this woman start yelling because the motor was kind of loud, so she yelled something about fish and some other words, and they seemed kind of confrontational. And then I remember I said, well, go straight out. I told the motorman, the guy who was driving, he's a Beirut combat veteran. He was there in the Beirut bombings when those suicide bombers went in and killed his best friend. So he was already suffering from PTSD. And then in the boat we had another teacher, a friend of ours from Green Bay. She works at the United School. And in the boat we had another friend of mine. His name is Leon Valier in Elda. So we had some people in the boat, that had experience in life. Anyway, we were cutting across this bay, and all of a sudden we heard that gunshot go off, and we heard those BBs fly all around us, and we dropped down, and I told him, just go faster. So he went faster, and all the ducks and the geese that were on the lake, they all took off and flew away. So this guy took a shot at us, and there's nothing like a gunshot to let you know you're alive, but that was a pretty terrifying moment. And those are the kind of moments that tell us that, this isn't over. This isn't over. There's people that don't want us out there. They don't want us taking the fish. They say, these are our fish, And so when this guy, I got on the phone and I called the sheriff's department right away, and they got there right away, thankfully. And usually what happens is they can pretty much say whatever they want and get away with it. This officer that came, he did his job really well. He took down every word that this man said. And so after he was questioned, he brought a shotgun out, and he said, this is the gun that I shot at a squirrel with a little while ago. And it was obviously nighttime, and squirrels don't climb around outside and digging garbage cans at night. We all know that. And so he had said that he was shooting at a squirrel, and he shot on the other side of the house, and he just completely fabricated everything up. And so they decided to take him to jail. And he says, well, and this is in the statement, he says, I don't want to go to jail and get COVID from them dirty Indians, something like that, you know. And so it's obvious, you know, this guy has animosity towards our tribe and what we do. And so later on, he when he went to court, and you know, we went through this whole battle, and it caused trauma to my friend Carl, the veteran in the boat. He, you know, because he was there when that bombing took place, and so I know that was PTSD really got him, and he had to see a counselor. And he said that was the first time since 1980 that he had been shot at like that, and he had any type of violence aimed at him that way. And so there was the teacher that was on the boat. She sustained some mental issues from that. And then there was myself and my teacher Leon in the boat, and we both were, you know, that's happened to us before, so it was a little easier on us. We kind of, you know, after a while, all that violence and stuff, that kind of, you get a little bit numb to that once in a while, I guess, you know. And so it wasn't really, you know, it's just a reality around here. You kind of gotta face it that way. Those things happen. You know, they shouldn't happen, but it does. If you want to provide that good life for your family, those are some of the things that you might run into up here in the ceded territory. And I guess it goes back to the thing, you know, that we have to remember. Treaties weren't only meant for Ojibways; they were signed by them people too, them and their leaders too, you know. And so, being a citizen of the United States, I think, like we're upholding our treaty end of the treaty rights, you know. And I think being your non-native citizen, you're a part of that treaty signing as well. And so you need to uphold your end too. And that's the other thing that we tell people, you know, you need to allow these things to happen, and, you know, just allow it to take place, because that's who we are. That's our identity. And that's, you know, if you didn't like spearing and natives, you know, why did you move into the ceded territory? You know, that it goes back to that question, you know, why are you here? And, you know, what's the issue? And so later on, the guy, you know, we took him to court, and he wound up just getting a $300 fisherman harassment fine. And he didn't get any kind of assault charges or anything like that. Everything was dropped. Apparently, when he was being apprehended by the arresting officer, he had dropped the name of the police chief. And so he had ties to the commission. He was one of their biggest fundraisers, because he maintained a business down where the incident took place, and he was one of the big key donators to the police commission and the police force down in Vilas County. And so there's all these little intricate things that we were learning later on after the court case. And so, you know, these are the realities that we have to face in the North Woods here. And so, and it doesn't stop there. You know, there was another time where we were, me and Leon were racing. We were on this lake, you know, and this boat, as we were coming out to get rice, we had already filled up one canoe, and we were taking the rice up. And this boat full of drunk guys came rolling in, and they were just ruthless, you know. They were just saying all these things, and they were, you know, asking us, you know, you dirty Indians eat that kind of stuff, huh? You know, and it kind of got confrontational, you know. We usually don't back down from anybody when it gets like that. And so we stood our ground, and, you know, we did what we could, dealing with that violent type of racism, you know. And but yeah, that's a regular occurrence. Last year, or even the year before, there was people on all these local Monaco lakes. They'll stand on their docks. They'll threaten to shoot you. They'll follow you. They'll slash your tires. I've had one person loosen the lug nuts up on my boat trailer, and I almost lost my boat one year. We've had our tires slashed. We've had our windows shattered. There's a lot of different things that have happened to us. you know, but we continue to do these things.
So this is something that's very much not in the past for us. We are trying every day to live as traditionally as possible and to do the things that we need to do to feed our children with good ingredients and with native foods and local things. And I mean, for me, I was halfway through my pregnancy with a Siganak with my first child, and I was new to the area at the time, and Greg calls me from the lake and says, well, we just got shot at and we're waiting. And I was freaking out. You know, I saw, it's hard. It's just a really real situation. And last spearing season, sorry, I was out when it started. I would go out and I would be at the landing and just stay in the car with the newborn baby, you know, and just be present, because you don't know. I mean, it's dark, it's nighttime. There's not always phone service. So if I wasn't there on the landing and something happened, I wouldn't know, you know? So it gave me more peace of mind to just go and be present and to wait there with him in the car, and just to make sure that they got back off the lake safely. But this has become a part of our life, is going around and kind of sharing how we're living and the different complexities of it. And something that Greg doesn't often share and doesn't always get brought up is that it could have been anyone in the boat. These guys bring out children, their whole families. There's women, I was out there pregnant with them, you know, they take out school children to teach them. It could have been anybody at all in that boat. And people don't think of that. They have some sort of horrible image in their head. And part of what we try to do is share that look, we're just trying to feed our families, you know. we're getting fish and we're eating them. They're going in the freezer, they're going to the community. These ingredients that are best for our bodies, that aren't containing a bunch of preservatives and chemicals, and from the waters that we work to help try to keep clean so that the fish are clean. It's a whole part of life. And, you know, yeah, tell him about it, baby. And as soon as he's big enough, he's going to be out there too. So this is a regular thing that we face, and we try to help educate people, is that it's a family affair. This is not, spearfishing is not some wild, rebellious, I don't even know what they think that it is, but it's families providing nutrients and building equity. And I don't know, I got emotional. It's been a while since we talked about spearfishing, so those emotions caught me off guard. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this last spring too, there was a young man who went over to Mille Lacs, and we're allowed some fish on Mille Lacs every year too. And this young man, he experienced some sexual harassment from one of the residents on that lake. You know, one of our young members from our tribe here. His mother's from Red Cliff, and his father is from Black Flambeau here. And he was over there with his family, and this guy, you know, exposed himself to this young man and started threatening him and teasing him and all this, you know. So this is a reality that our people have to face every spring and every season, you know, with hunting or spearing, fishing, ricing. Doesn't really matter. Even harvesting birch bark, we have people out there that don't want us to do that, you know. So they try to stop us and prevent us from doing that, you know, because it makes their forest look bad, you know. And just a quarter mile down the road, there's a massive clear cut. So, you know, you tell me who the land rapers are, and, you know, maybe we can have a sit down on this. But, you know, it's not my job to educate these non-native people on anything. You know, it's their school system, and it's their education system that's failing them. You know, we know who we are, and we know who they are, but they don't know who we are, and they don't want to know who we are. We're just a thorn, you know. We're just a thorn in their side. And so I think it's about time that, you know, the government and the education system steps up and they really educate their people on Indigenous tribal ways and treaties, you know. And so those are those are my concerns, you know. I have enough to do with my family and my community and the students that I teach, you know. I have enough. So that side of it isn't my job. It's the job of the their own leaders and their own people, you know. And so the best we can do is go around when we do our teachings everywhere. We talk a little bit about treaty rights and things like that, you know. But I always say it's not my job to educate you. You know, you guys have to learn this on your own. And this is treaties go two ways. They're signed by more than one person. So.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot to be said about the intentional misinformation that was originated during those first times. A lot of people don't understand that during that time period, during the 1980s, the Wisconsin DNR and the governor himself were intentionally disseminating information that was false as to why the fish populations were so depleted at that point in time. A lot of what I was brought up understanding was this idea of the environmental aspect of it. And at that time, you know, EPA was really just kind of coming through, and a lot of the states were still really fighting against those federal regulations. And they were really upset about the fact that they had to regulate, they had to monitor, they had to pay attention. And tribes at that point in time were actually doing a significant amount of the work in our communities. They were really working really hard to try and actually I think Michael had mentioned before, right? Like, we're the ones who are stocking the lakes. We're the ones with the fish hatcheries. We're the one who are creating all the space for these fish to actually be there in the first place. And I think there's a lot of space that we don't understand how long the longevity of that misinformation has continued, right? Because the people who are now today were the kids who were brought up and raised in those time periods, and so now they're the adults, and they're the ones who think they know what's going on. Wisconsin has Act 31, where it's by law they're responsible to teach treaty rights. But I've know students, I've been working with students who are 14, 15 years old, and say, we've never learned this. It's a law in Wisconsin, and they still don't even have that information. They don't necessarily have that same law in Minnesota. I know they're working on it. There's none of those laws here in Michigan at all. And they're working on them, but what does that actually mean, right? And it's always up to each individual teacher, each individual classroom. And like Greg had said, all that information is out there. All of that exists. We have our leaders and our workers have already put time, energy, and effort, decades into providing the appropriate information. And yet that is not being taught in those spaces. You'll find that there's one or two teachers in a given district or two who might really have that passion, but that's not the truth. And our children are being taught, our communities are being taught, our kids are having that opportunity, whether it be because their grandparents are there, their aunties and uncles, whether because they're in a tribal school or they have access to that information. But our kids know who we are. And I think I would reiterate what Greg was saying. Not only were they non-native people, they don't know who we are, but I would beg to differ. They don't know who they are themselves. They don't know themselves in what they signed, and they don't even know how to hold themselves accountable to the as signatories on those spaces. And so there's a lot to be said about taking that burden off of us and asking them to really step up and learn about who it is you actually are in this space. So just wanted to reiterate that, what he was saying.
Yeah, thank you. I think that when I look at the written issue for this project, you know, there was a lot of holes in there, and I think that you guys have really filled in the rest of that story and given a lot more sight to what it really is about, you know. And so thank you all for sharing that with us. And we're coming up on 2-hour mark, which is definitely pushing it. I know you guys have things to do. So Quentin, if you have any final words to say, or anybody wants to, yeah, Jerry, definitely. We're gonna go ahead and do a final round. If you guys have anything that you want to add as we wrap up. So if you want to hop in there, Jerry, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up, because you had kind of talked about sort of the timeline of these things, going back to the treaties and all of that stuff. And there's a lot of conversations too about court cases, right, and the legality of these things. And one of the stories that often gets left out, and I guess that's why I'm here, is to talk about like one of the first treaty rights victories in the country that happened in Michigan involving my grandfather. So like you had mentioned before, a lot of the people leading up to that point with those court victories, they were getting jailed, and their gear was getting confiscated. They were being fined. Their boats were taken, like you name it. They were getting beaten. Some people were getting killed even over these things. And it was in 1965 when my grandfather was cited for having 4 lake trout illegally, according to the state of Michigan. That was during a time when the states had assumed authority over the tribes, but it wasn't legal. And so we knew that. We knew what our rights were. You don't sign over millions of acres of land and forget, the rights that you've retained in those agreements. And so our people knew that. And there were people in the past that have fought it legally. They've been ticketed and they took it to court and they lost. Well, my grandfather just kept appealing those decisions. So in the lower court system, he was found guilty for having 4 lake trout out of season. This is on Lake Superior. And he kept appealing it and kept appealing it and kept losing and kept losing. And it finally made its way up to the Supreme Court of Michigan. And that's probably why it's not talked about very, very often, because the breadth of the decision was really just confined to Michigan at that time. But he eventually won the court case in 1971. And that really set precedent for a lot of these other court cases that followed. So that was, to my knowledge, the first court victory reaffirming treaty rights in the country. And then not long after that, after 71, you just see this snowball effect of all these other court cases that were being won, because there was actually precedent that was established underneath the Jandro decision. And so that was, it was really important. And I try to stress that. I know it's a family thing, right? And I'm kind of tooting my own horn, but it's a really important part of history that often gets overlooked. If you didn't have those challenges that actually overturned some of the previous convictions in our community related to treaty rights, there wouldn't be that foundation for the other victories that were had in Michigan, in Wisconsin, like leading up to the Voight decision that was in federal court. And honestly, the decision should have been in the federal court system as well, but it wasn't, because again, at that time, the states had assumed authority over tribes. And so without those court victories preceding the Voight court case, I don't think the Walleye Wars would have even happened unless you had those legal victories that our grandparents and fathers and mothers, and the battles that they fought to allow us to even exercise those rights still to this day. So I know, a lot of the people I know, being up here in the UP, we're really close to Wisconsin and Minnesota. And that's one thing I've noticed, and I tell Katie this all the time. I think the people in Wisconsin and Minnesota forget that Michigan is a big Anishinaabe nation too. And, we've been doing a lot of work over here as well. There's Alex. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? We get lost in the shuffle over here, but, we've been throwing down too. And, a lot of the work that gets done over here is really important and has those impacts that are national, really, in scope. So, maybe that's another thing to add to the timeline of court cases, because the John Doe decision really just kicked off a lot of that, set the precedent for a lot of the other court cases that came after it. I think Katie wants to say something too.
Well, and just to kind of add to that, that idea is this idea of who we are as a nation, right? Like we talk about, you know, gotta love those Flamboyants over there, right? Like y'all are repping real hard right now, and
Sometimes, you know,
but we forget Misako and Shnabi or King, right? Like here we are in Ojibwe country, and that spreads to our brothers over there on the other side of the border, except, you know, Quentin, you're way the heck over there, a couple borders away nowadays. But I think someone mentioned it earlier on, you know, this idea that it brought a lot of our communities together, because that fight, you see us now going to we got put onto these reservations, right? Like it wasn't just this way so long ago. And so what you're seeing now, because of those fights and because of what those warriors and those wars had done, is these conversations where we're coming to these spaces and we're talking together, and we're being brought together. And even those of us who might have been like former enemies and whatnot, we have these conversations about food and whatnot, and we have our Lakota friends now that we might have been enemies just even, you know, however many years ago. And we have our big drums that are pulling people together and bringing that peace and that conversation for us together. And we're talking with the Diné right here, right? And we're talking with our folks from all over. And that part is I think the most powerful of it. And the gratitude, I know as someone who, I don't know any different, right? Like I was saying earlier, I was just one of these young ones when all this was happening. And I know ours, I see it, you know, Siganak and our little boys here too. And they won't know any different than this either, because of all this that has come forward of it. And it has brought us to the place where we know what's worth fighting for, and who it is we're really fighting against, and who we want to fight with. And I think that has been such a powerful space for all of us to really look amongst ourselves and to look forward with what we're trying to do. So gonna adjust it for me. So
no, thank you. Yeah, Jay, I'll definitely one of the beautiful things about our platform, and something that we did very, very intentionally, was to put it forward right out the gate that it's a living document, and that it will always be growing and expanding. And this is the reason why, because there's only so much information unless you're within a community, right? It's like all the stuff that we know within community is vastly different than the spectrum of what you're going to learn through reading a book or any of those things. So I will definitely, I'm going to go back and read that court case. Actually, I already pulled it up on my phone, and we'll add that to the timeline for sure. Michael, do you have anything you want to say in closing?
No, I just want to say McGwitch for letting me speak about this. I never really talked about it again since that time. So talking to Quentin about a month ago, he's telling me what was going on. I was really excited about it, and just glad to share my thoughts and my memories about what happened at that timeline at the time.
All right, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Greg, you guys have anything left to say?
Yeah, I just want to tell everybody, McGwitch, Jerry, and Katie, and Mike. It's good to see you guys again. The treaty rights are always going to be there. I don't even like calling them treaty rights. I just think it's something that our grandfathers gave us. And I think that's a really good gift. It's a really powerful thing to give. Give to their children and great grandchildren and so on and so forth. And I think that we just gotta keep working at it. There's always something that has to be done, something new. A few years back, I have a picture of my great uncle, and he's holding a 6.5-foot sturgeon. And and I understand from our oral history and everything that sturgeons were a part of our diet as well. Big part of our diet here. But we have dams here now, and there's all this stuff preventing those sturgeons from coming back into our territory here. And so I asked a question to our Voight reps. I said, well, why can't we get a sturgeon? I said, well, no, it's not written in the treaties. You know, it's not written in the treaties. We never agreed to any of that. And then I was sitting there thinking, and I was like, well, can I get a sturgeon? Can I even go get a sturgeon? I know where there's 100 sturgeon. Can I go get one? And they said, no, we can't really do that. We never, like I said, he said, we never really, it was never written in the treaties. The only thing that were negotiated were the muskies and the walleyes and a few of the other fish, but nothing like that, you know. And I said, well, why is it this picture from 1907, you know, why is he holding a fish and why can't I get one? That was a big part of the diet. Then I asked our 97-year-old elder here in Lac Flambeau, tell me the story of this fish. So he told me that he speared it through the ice and he shared this fish with everybody that came to help him get it out of the lake. And they passed the roll, the eggs, they gave that out to everybody and they passed that whole fish off. They gave everybody in the village a piece of that fish, a steak of that fish. So everybody got benefited from that, you know. And I said, well, I want to do the same thing. You know, why can't I do it? And he said, well, I said, okay, well, you guys give us ceremonial harvest permits for a deer. I says, I want one for a fish. And they went, okay, that might work. You know, we can probably do that for you, you know. And then I had the chairman at the time, Tom Molson, he saw that and he said, oh, this is a great idea. You know, this will open the doors. So he signed it and he handed it to me. And then I went out and I got the sturgeon. But before I went out there, I went to the landing where I said I was going to be, and there was armed wardens there, state wardens. And me wanting to get one sturgeon was a threat to the Natural Resource Department. It was insane. So I had all these people with guns, you know, waiting for me to screw up, arrest me. And I don't know what they thought. There was going to be a mob. I don't know. Anyway, they had all these things, you know, they had their fish scientists there, and they said, well, you know, we don't tell people that these sturgeons are here, but there's a lot of them here and we don't want it to get out. So please, you know, try not to say anything. And they're like telling me all this information that's useless to me, you know.
And that they were all their sturgeon.
Yeah, they said that we raised all these sturgeon, we released them, all this and that. And I was like,
they all have these trackers in them.
yeah, they had these little things embedded in them to track them, you know.
Hit tags.
I said, you guys don't own everything. And so when I got the sturgeon, they wanted to they had this little thing and they wanted to see if there was a chip in there. Anyway, they put their little magic wand over it and there was no chip in this fish, you know. Anyway, I loaded that fish up and I said, see, you guys don't know everything. And I left with that fish. And, you know, that was a good lesson for them to go through. And now from that, our tribe can go harvest sturgeon now. We've set the precedence on that, you know, just because of that one issue, you know. What we did was we made that available for our membership now. Now all the tribes that are part of the Voight setup, they're all they can all harvest sturgeons now, like with the set. And I think it's important for our kids to continue to do that and to push those limits, you know, because Ojibwe people originally, they were opportunistic. They were, you know, you hear these stories of my grandparents go out, they went out to check their traps, but he brought a shotgun along and maybe he saw some ducks, and so he didn't spring the traps, but he had a few ducks and coots to bring home, you know, and they would eat those, or maybe you know, he got some birch bark or whatever, you know. They never came home empty-handed, you know, and that's what I tell my students, and that's what I tell my children, you know. Always, when you go out, don't just go out and get one thing, you know, try to make the most of your time here in the forest, you know, and I think that's important for our people to understand that and know that.
And a big part of the story that he forgot to say is that if it's not written in the treaties, that means we didn't cede it, we didn't give it up. So the sturgeon not being written into the treaty agreements meant that we never agreed to give up the spearing rights to that fish.
Yeah, and so that was the other part of that too. That's what I argued. I said, well, the way the treaties are written, it's open to interpretation. That's what we're always told. Well, I said, well, the way I read it is, you know, our people never gave up the right to sturgeon. So they agreed, and their lawyers agreed, and that became part of our new hunting and gathering rights now. So.
So I think these things are all important to know for the future and for bringing up the next generations, is that, you know, those agreements, we got to really look at them. We got to read them. We got to know them. We got to think about them, because our ancestors were smart.
Yeah, and we can't have somebody in a suit and tie telling us what that means. We got to determine what that means.
Yeah, it's up to us. It's our responsibility to know and to really take on ownership of these things and these lifeways, because it's not anybody else's responsibility. It's ours. If we want this life, if we want this future, we have to do the work.
Yeah, the chairman of the DNR, he doesn't feed his kids walleye and wild rice, you know, so he doesn't know what he's talking about.
And a thing too is all the problems and the statistics that you hear today, like with the health problems and different, like, mental health, physical health, and then different rates of incarceration and crime and all sorts of stuff. You know, it's not happening when families are out spearing together. Anything else? When we're coming together and doing the work of the land and to live this way, there's not time for anything else. You're all doing the work and getting your hands to it and investing in health, in the ingredients that our bodies are supposed to be eating, are supposed to be taking in. It's a big picture thing. And, you know, we do a lot too of, you know, arts and crafts and a lot of traditional life ways. And we always talk about the mental health aspect of it too. You know, there's something that happens, mental health, when you come together as a community and practice these ways and rely on each other and feed each other and do the work together. So it's important. It's all very important to learn and to teach.
Awesome. Well, we greatly appreciate hearing everything that everyone has had to say, and I know I'm thankful for everyone that's come on to this. I want to say in closing, because again, we want to be respectful to everyone's time that's going on. I know we're all in different time zones, and I'm in a different country, but I want to say thank you to everyone to coming out and partaking in this. I see Abby is no longer with us, but I'll send her an email to say thank you for her participation in this. Carlos, is there anything you want to end off or add to this in closing?
No, just reiterate what you just said. You know, thank you guys very much for your voices and your work, and you know, as we move forward in the, you know, through the project of decolonization and really stepping back into who we are, you know, what's been stolen from us. These stories, it's a, you know, I mean, it's a living, breathing textbook, you know, that we get to take part in. And I think that, you know, whenever we're able to sit down in these spaces like this and have these conversations to where the reality is on display, right? Where the truth is really present, and the indigenous voice is the one that's providing the true history, as opposed to the whitewashed version of things that happened. You know, I think it's a benefit for all indigenous people. So, you know, thank you guys very much, and hopefully we'll be seeing you again soon whenever we do the live on this. You guys have a good night. Have a good day.
All right.
Yeah, miigwech to everybody for sharing and putting your emotions whenever we talk about these things. It always invokes, you know, some deep-rooted traumas, and it's I just want to acknowledge that, you know, to everyone here, sharing those things. I don't think people, especially non-tribal people, understand that, you know, when we share these things, that, you know, it's coming from pain, it's coming from hurt, and it's coming from a lot of kind of deep, dark places within us. And I just want to acknowledge that for all of you guys, and giving us the opportunity to share some of these truths with all of you too. So miigwech to everyone that's here. I appreciate it.
Hi, hi. All right, folks, with that being said, I'm going to once again say thank you for everyone's time, and I will close this meeting. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.